All right, and welcome back to Veterans Beyond the Wire podcast. I am your host, Tim Keller. Along with me is Mr. Matt Disher, and we have a fantastic guest with us this week, Mr. Chris Newsome. He is a 82nd Airborne U.S. Army veteran with tours overseas, and he is currently the Senior Vice President for DoD programs at RecruitMilitary. So we look forward to having this discussion with him.
Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. But before we get into this discussion, Matt had a great idea. Why don't we kind of talk about some current military news? So we went to military.com. We wanted to pull up a couple news articles maybe and talk about them, but we found one in particular, and Matt agrees with me. We got to focus on the important things.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll read the headline, and then we'll get into this a little bit. Military.com has the headline, "The Army thinks these mixed reality doggles can make spec op canines better in battle."
Augmented reality goggles for dogs.
Now, I had that same thought when I read the headline. Augmented reality goggles for dogs. But it seems like, and I think people's minds and hearts are in the right place here. There's the HoloLens on a dog, it says. It's apparently some technology that soldiers have been wearing and using, and now they're able to possibly put these on canines, on these Army working dogs, and from a safe distance, you see what the dog sees. And so a dog can run into a building, and he enters a room, and you're able to essentially put a laser pointer on an object and grab that dog's attention and tell him, "Hey, I need you to focus over here. Let's check this out."
Let's think about this for a minute. We've seen the fur missile videos on YouTube, right? The dog being released from the back of the police car, or the dog in a combat operation. It's dark. It is smoky. There's chaos. People yelling. There's gunfire, and now we're going to overhuman this thing and give the controls to some E4, right? Who's like, "Hey, go attack that guy." I mean, these dogs, literally, you can see these videos, the body cam videos from the cops. These dogs go charging into the woods. Mm-hmm. And they go find the dog where the humans cannot. I don't know how. I mean, aside from the cool idea of having a camera, perhaps, where now we can watch the dog attacking a bad guy in the dark through their goggles. I don't know how the human's going to make this operate any better than the dog would have done it anyway.
I agree. That's my concern as we use these animals, because they have these enhanced senses that us humans don't have. And that's what makes them useful to us. Hopefully, we still allow them to use their own senses and things of that nature. But I mean, it seems pretty cool. I mean, they go into a guy who works with these working dogs, and he says he had a dog mater who had never worn the goggles. It took the dog about a week to get used to them, and then once the dog is used to wearing these goggles, he can start putting in this augmented reality and start trying to train him on these sort of things. But, maybe at least you'll get some fun footage.
I don't have a dog. So, Chris, when these come out on the civilian market, I'm coming to your house to put it on your dog, and we're going to run around in the backyard.
Yeah. Yeah, my 40-pound beagle mix will be a great test of it.
Well, the dog in the story that we were looking at looks like a 12-year-old Rottweiler mix, Rottweiler lab mix or something like that. So I mean, if we can do it with that
more
dog,
intimidating than what I have.
Right.
Well, just have it chase Matt around your backyard for a while, and it'll be fun.
Point that on his
Point the
laser. You don't
laser.
need augmented reality for that.
That's the truth.
Stranger danger.
Stranger danger. And if Matt doesn't shave for a while, he does look like he should be on a Stranger Danger commercial. So
I'll end up on a wanted poster.
All right. So now that we got some news out of the way, let's focus back on the guest. So Chris, I mentioned in the intro here, you were 82nd Airborne, U.S. Army. When were you in, and what made you join?
Yeah. So I joined. My official start date, if you will, was June of 2002. I joined because of September 11th. I was a senior in high school at the time. So, we still had the big boxy televisions that they put on the big steel rollers, and I remember being in English class and being carted into the library essentially, and having those TVs rolled out and watched it unfold in real time on the news. And you know, I didn't know how to feel at first. I was confused. I was angry. And within a day or two, I went to the recruiter station just to start to inquire. I had never really considered military service. Matt and I had known each other, and Matt had actually already gone into the service a year or so prior to myself. So I had a couple people within my immediate network that I knew were, military guys or were in the process of becoming, an active duty service member. So I didn't feel like I was doing it alone, but that was my main reason. September 11th, I just felt like New York was my backyard for some reason. It just felt very personal. So I went to the recruiter station, and by November of 2001, I was in the delayed entry program, and then June shipped off to Fort Benning for basic, advanced individual training, airborne school, and was assigned to the 82nd Airborne. And then I ended up doing a couple tours, as you had mentioned, 3 to be precise. In 2003, I went to Afghanistan, 04 to Iraq, and then 05, 06 back to Iraq. So 2 tours in Iraq, 1 in Afghanistan, and I was done after that. So by the summer of 2006, I had finished my 4-year term, achieved the rank of sergeant, always wanted to be a non-commissioned officer. So I kind of checked a handful of very, modest and tactical blocks that I was looking to check. And that was it. I had a high school sweetheart I was coming home to. I wanted to see if the grass was greener on the other side. So I think as most of us endure when we initially transition, at least at some point, you yearn to go back. But, I came back and kind of planted my roots and got going with my civilian pivot. But 02 to 06, that was my time of service with the 82nd.
Now, you were with the 82nd Airborne? You were a paratrooper. Is that something you wanted to do, or is that kind of what the Army said? Hey, this is what we kind of got.
Yeah, a little bit of both. Again, I went into the recruiter station fairly ignorant. I really didn't know anything about the military. I mean, perfect for the picking, for that recruiter. I was such an easy target for them to scoop up. I was like, yeah, I'm mad. Who does the fighting? They said the infantry. I said, I'll do that. And I said, who's likely to go somewhere? They said the 82nd is always going somewhere. They're mobile. They need to be able to deploy anywhere in the world, within 24 hours. So the likelihood of them, deploying somewhere near or right on top of the bad guys seemed likely. So I said, I'll do that. They said, that means, you got to be airborne. You have to jump out of planes. I was afraid of heights. Still kind of am. But it seemed it had the wow factor. It had sex appeal. That job seemed really cool. So it wasn't a hard sell for me. I said, I'll do that. And that's how I got to the 82nd.
On the topic of fear of heights, the military, as I found also the hard way, doesn't care about your fears. They don't care about whatever you're afraid of. They don't care what you want, as a matter of fact. Get up on that rappel tower and slide down the rope.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That is the easiest way to overcome, some of those metaphoric obstacles that are in your way, is to just embrace them, push yourself past that point of no return and just do it. When in airborne, it's static line. So you're in the belly of a C-130, a C-17, even a C-5 in some cases. And, you've got the static line running. And when you stand up and hook up, the jump masters are giving you your guidance and your commands. When that light turns green, you're sardined. You've got guys in front of you. You've got guys behind you. So you don't really have
one
a choice,
direction to go.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. And you always hear the the scary stories of those jump masters will literally jump onto the rafters and kick you out of the door if you hesitate. So hesitation was never really crossed my mind, although I thought, man, I would do anything to get out of this, for that green light to turn red all of a sudden, for the winds to pick up and have this scrap. But
we're going home.
Once you get sorry gang, that was a really expensive practice run here, but we're going to go ahead and turn her around. But yeah, once you pass that point of no return, it's whether it's jumping out of an airplane or doing anything, entering a building, a room, once you cross that threshold, you just embrace it. That's a really great way to kind of embrace whatever you're afraid of, and just accept that the inevitable is inevitable, and just keep going forward.
I've not jumped out of an airplane. I've done, other fun things in the military and not, but I've always found, and this is probably the case here with jumping out of an airplane, I've always found that the anticipation is much worse than the actual event. Am I right there?
100%. Yeah. Spot on. It's, you get those butterflies in your belly, but yeah, it's you have fun. And again, jumping out of an airplane is just like any of the other crazy stuff the military is going to throw at you. But you get past the discomfort, and once you do embrace it, it is fun. Some of that stuff is really fun.
So let's talk about you mentioned before you wanted to see if the grass was greener on the other side of your transition. What did you find? Was the grass greener on the other side?
At times, at times it was, I can't tell you how many times, especially for, you guys were combat arms, so you can appreciate it. When you've got somebody that's combat arms and you're living and operating in a garrison environment, when you're back on base, when you're back home, you're not deployed, and you've got, all these standards, grooming standards. I can't tell you how long I wanted to ETS just so I could put my hands in my pockets. I'm a casual guy. I like to have my hands in my pockets. So the fact that I had to do push-ups, anytime I was caught, with my hands in my pockets, I kind of something in me just said, one of these days I'm out of here and I'm never going to look back. I'm going to have my hands in my pockets while I walk out the gate. You don't even know what to do with your hands if you're not saluting or at parade rest or attention.
Right.
But the grass is always greener on the other side, when we're thinking about making a fundamental life change. And as much as I enjoyed coming back home and reconnecting with all of my good friends, to include, my dear friend here, Matt, who's my first roommate outside of the military when I came back. It was good to have, to have that camaraderie that helped, and I think a lot of what our peers end up doing is you get out and you go back home and all your buddies from the block, you just pick up exactly where you left off. And I did that to an extent. And, Matt and I had some mutual friends that were those guys from the block, and it didn't take us long to realize that, maybe we need a little bit of distance between us and them.
Right.
So, you get home and you start doing the whole thing. You get a job, or you go to school, or your weekends are, palling around with your buddies, and you start to realize you don't have the same level of community, camaraderie, some of those really invaluable elements of military service and, your military brothers and sisters that you serve with. It's hard to replace that. It's hard to try to force, your civilian experience to reflect that, because it's not going to. It's, there's going to be an element of disappointment simply because you'll never, it's hard to recreate that zenith, that height of where you were, the excitement, the adrenaline, again, the camaraderie. But I don't regret anything. There were certainly times where I wish I had re-enlisted or pursued a few other, military goals that I had. I had other things that I would have loved to accomplish in the military, but I needed more time. 4 years is enough to only do so much. But I'm happy where I am. Bottom line, I'm I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. And if I had made a different decision along the way, I may not be where I am today. So I'm grateful for where I am, but there are certainly many, many times still to this day where I miss, serving in the military, putting on that uniform, doing even some of the hurry up and wait and the nonsense that we yearn to get away from. I miss it sometimes. So
we never had any of that.
It's all about perspective.
There wasn't any nonsense in my world.
Yeah,
it was all business.
Yeah. I will say this: at the time, getting out after 4 years, thinking, man, I don't think I could do another 16 of these. And now I would have been in 21, and people I was in with came in same time or right after me, and I'm watching these individuals happily retire with 20 plus years of military service, and I'm like, man, if so-and-so did it, I knew I could have. Man, I should have just stuck it out, but we each have our own path, and I think at least for me, and it seems like you're the same way, Chris, we thought at least the grass would be greener. We wanted to go check it out for ourselves. So, talking about the sometimes grass being greener and sometimes not, you really specialize in trying to make that grass as green as possible for people transitioning nowadays. Why don't you talk about a little bit about RecruitMilitary and what they do and what you do nowadays?
Yeah, thanks. What I do today, and what I know you guys do, there's value in staying connected. Staying connected to the military community in any capacity, whether that's supporting a local DAV outlet, 5K, just being a part of, being a mentor, being in the military community in any way, shape, or form helps us to kind of keep, stay sane and hold on to some of those great attributes that came hand in hand with military service. When I first started working with RecruitMilitary, as fate would have it, again, Matt and my paths they cross so often. So Matt had been working at RecruitMilitary for a few months before I got there, and I think I was doing security and executive protection work here in Cincinnati, Ohio. I thought that was going to be the closest thing to recreating my military experience, was to just any kind of security and executive protection work. But you quickly end up becoming a bellhop for rich people, and it loses its luster pretty fast. So I'm talking to Matt, probably complaining about my job at the time, and Matt says, you really ought to come down here and see what these guys are all about, see what this organization is doing, because it might interest you. And I came down, I went in for an interview, and I would have been happy to take a volunteer opportunity as the janitor, because the company was the mission was so cool, and that's something that I think a lot of our men and women, as they transition, are looking for, but they don't know they're looking for it. They don't realize how important it is right out the gate. It's mission. What is the company mission? What is your purpose in life now? Because you go from serving with extreme purpose, where literally lives are in your hands in some cases, to all of a sudden you're in a college classroom with a bunch of kids, or a job that you may not be terribly passionate about. So that's where I was up to that point. And after, being introduced to RecruitMilitary, that was the closest thing I had ever found to continuing my service without having to put on a uniform, re-enlisting, and sleeping outside. So it was just absolutely fortuitous. I'm forever grateful, for the organization that I work with, and for Matt introducing me to it. But at RecruitMilitary, we are a military to civilian recruiting firm, meaning we're connecting servicemen and women with employment opportunities and just career upward mobility in general as they transition, or even if you've been out of the service for any period of time, Guard, Reserve, Veteran, active duty, military spouses as well. So the military community at large. And we go about connecting them through a lot of different ways. We have career fairs. COVID-19 has obviously wreaked havoc on the physical career fair realm, so we do a lot of virtual career fairs. But we have a job board, resume database, so think Monster or Career Builder, Indeed, similar in concept, however exclusive to the military community. And placement services and a lot of other, anything that is employment recruited related, RecruitMilitary is doing some form of it. So it doesn't really matter what your MOS was. It doesn't matter what your rank was, what you did, what you want to do. There is something for everybody, because the military reflects the entire American population. It's a melting pot. It's very diverse. There's a lot of different MOSs, and a lot of these men and women are going in different directions once they transition from the service. What I do now is very different from what I did as an 11 Bravo infantryman in the Army. So we try to make sure that we're bringing diverse opportunities to these men and women, so that they don't feel like they have to be pigeonholed. They don't have to make the same decisions that all of us did at some point. Matt, myself, and Tim, I'm sure you did too. You took a random job at some point when you initially transitioned, whether it was one or whether it was many. As you try to find your way and navigate and truly mentally transition, it's a process, and it doesn't happen quickly. It's not necessarily going to take hold after a couple weeks in your transition classes, from the installation. It's a lifelong process in some cases, but we want these men and women to understand that they have access. They can do anything they want to do. They still have to interview. They still have to champion for themselves. They still have to stand out as the best person for that job. But we want to put them in an environment where they have a new dedicated level of attention. They don't just get mixed in with the general population. They're not just a number, because we feel strongly that these men and women are the absolute best that America has to offer. Not to be, a bunch of self-back-patting, narcissists. The veteran community truly is, a cut above. There's data that supports that, we're going to perform a little bit better than our non-military counterparts. We're going to stay longer, and companies really care about retention. It's expensive to have a revolving door, to have men and women come in and out just at the same rate. So all things, everything recruiting oriented, and we want to make sure we get these guys and gals from every corner of the earth, at least to be aware that they have access to opportunities and diverse opportunities.
No, it's interesting. Sorry, Tim. I saw you start to take a breath, and I was like, hold on.
Go ahead.
So we're talking about resources for transition, and RecruitMilitary is one of a handful of resources that's probably like a legacy resource too. And what I mean by that is, Chris, there are a lot of these organizations that come and go. What's the number? How many in the Cincinnati tri-state area? How many nonprofits that exist to service veterans?
I mean, just in the tri-state, I'd say there's probably at least 1,500. And they come small, medium, large. I believe the national number is 45,000 military-centric nonprofits that are currently registered with the IRS. And you've got some that are absolute champions that are doing phenomenal things out there. But as you can imagine, not every one of those 45,000 is amazing. They all have good intentions. They all try. And in many cases, it's guys like us that are out there trying. We recognize a gap, and we want to try to fill it, and we want to try to formalize that because it has to be subsidized. And you might have a great goal or mission, but the business acumen may not be strong enough to have a sustainable model. So they come and go, unfortunately. And what that means is that, you get a lot of these men and women that will invest everything in that one organization that may have gotten their attention first. And if they're unable to deliver a positive outcome or satisfactory results, whatever it was that service member was hoping to achieve by virtue of working with that organization, if it doesn't happen, they get disenchanted and they'll disconnect entirely from the concept. So all of the other organizations, it seems as though they're all the same, when in reality they're not. But with that volume of help, it's noisy. It's a sea of voices, and it's hard for the end user, the service member, to truly be able to identify effectively who is the best, who is going to have my best interest in mind at all times, and how am I going to be, successful if I have all these different parties telling me that they're going to do this for me, they're going to do that for me. So it's a weird problem to have. We have so much help that it's almost too much help.
Right. And RecruitMilitary, so we're talking about these other organizations, though, these other ones that have popped up. Most of them, or a lot of them, have popped up after 9/11. They're post 9/11, aiming to service the post 9/11 careerists or veteran service or military service members. RecruitMilitary was around prior to 9/11, prior to the hype of hiring military. Am I right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's right. The founder, Drew Myers, started the organization in 1998. He was actually a Marine captain in the artillery, MOS, and he had been in human capital with what is now our COO, Larry Slagle, also a Marine captain. He was a tanker, and those two kind of palled together. They worked in various recruiting functions. I believe Larry may have even worked for Orion at one point, or Lucas Group, but they quickly thought to themselves, we can do this. We can do this better. You know, we can go off on our own and throw our hat in the ring. And they did. And Recruit Military started in 1998 as essentially a junior military officer contingency headhunting firm. And that's how most of those employment-oriented organizations start, or even currently are. It's placement services. And it just so happens that junior military officers are usually the easiest ones to place because they have more invested in them as far as education and training and leadership goes. So that's low-hanging fruit. You know, any organization would always immediately benefit from having a JMO on their team. But what Recruit Military realized that, you know, not every organization out there has kind of gotten hip to is, you know, don't you dare neglect the enlisted side. That is the majority of the population. You've got 85% of the transitioning military. They're enlisted, and they're just as squared away in many cases. They're comparable to their JMO counterparts in so many cases. So, you know, as it turns out today, you know, we place more enlisted than we do on the JMO side. So it's been an interesting shift in the dynamic. And that, you know, that had been the case since like World War II. Some of those organizations came around, you know, many, many decades ago. So Recruit Military really wanted to stand out and be unique. And that's where, instead of being a one-trick pony, we dabble in a number of different verticals on the recruiting side. You know, we have our in-house technology. You know, we have our own job board. We don't outsource these things. When we put on a career fair, it's our people, it's our boots on the ground. We're not bringing in a logistics crew to do that. We do it all in-house so that we can maintain quality control, consistency, and work in volume. But again, you know, with those other 45,000 organizations, they do a lot of different, you know, they do a lot of different things. You know, it's not just about employment. And I'll be the first to say that when we're talking to a group of transitioning personnel. It's not just about a job. If you don't have a holistic support system, you know, sound mind, body, and soul, and a good network around you, all the other stuff is going to fall apart. You're going to lose the job. You're going to quit the job. You know, it just goes to the wayside if you don't have the other elements squared away. So that's where, instead of us trying to be everything to everybody, we focus on our forte, and that's employment. That's connecting these two parties. That's what we're good at. So that's what we do. When it comes to the other stuff, that's where we tag in our partners along the way. You know, that's where, you know, if somebody needs help with benefits or pushing a claim through the VA or legal advocacy, the DAV, you know, they're you know, they're in the top 4 as far as VSOs go. So we make sure that we recognize what we're good at and when we need to tag somebody else in.
Yep. Very cool.
You mentioned your guys' job board. The website says over 1 million registered veterans. So companies looking to hire veterans, it's a wealth of resources here. Over 1 million candidates registered for the site. And then you mentioned the job fairs a couple times now, and how, you know, you guys do it. You guys like to make sure that you have your hands there in the dirt, creating these, hosting these, making sure from start to finish they are the quality that people from Recruit Military expect, and you guys continue to deliver. But over 100 job fairs and 60 plus markets. So you guys are nationwide. You know, you and Matt are both from the Cincinnati area, but it's not just a Cincinnati thing. I was just looking at some of the job fairs: Texas, California, Pittsburgh, Baltimore, DC, all over the place, the Southeast, anywhere and everywhere. If you are a transitioning veteran and are looking for a job, this might be a resource that could definitely help you. Chris, I wanted to ask you a little bit about you specifically and what you're doing now. You're the Senior Vice President of Department of Defense Programs. All 3 of us went through the TAP programs when we were getting out of the military. What do you know? I know personally, when I left the military, I thought, man, they kind of said, hey, when you get out, you should get a resume, and you should, go around and try to start conversations with people and try to network a little bit, and best of luck to you. Here you go. There was definitely a large, you mentioned about filling the gap earlier. There was a large gap that needed to be filled, I feel personally, on the military side of things. They probably could do more. So since you've gotten out and what you experienced, what have you seen change? What has gotten better on that side of things?
I've seen transition managers and curriculum in general has gotten more granular in a good way. They're better understanding some of the nuances associated with transition, but there are still gaps because you got to remember that they're 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 churning volume, and it's important for us, as veterans and as Americans in general, to appreciate the fact that it is not the Department of Defense's job to prepare us for the next career that we have. The fact that they have the transition programs that they do is a testament to, the fact that they care and they want to make sure that we're squared away when we hit the ground. And it's not a bad recruiting tool either. If men and women are taken care of, if they have jobs, if they transition successfully, then that bodes well for the next generation that's going to come in and enlist. Think about it like a college billboard. If you see a school and it says 95% successful career attainment upon graduation, that's a good recruiting tool. And I think that's what the military is going for now, and that's why they're putting a little bit more emphasis on employment. If you can dispel all of those myths and stigmas associated with being a veteran, you see guys on the street sometimes outside of a sports venue begging, and it paints a picture, and it's not a realistic picture. That's not that's not common. There are a lot of resources and assets out there for these men and women. But if you can say, in a national narrative that you have, a 90+% chance of getting a great new career by virtue of your military service because your talents are so highly sought after, it's a great tool. But where I find the biggest gap is the individual and it doesn't matter, name an installation and it's applicable. They don't have full grasp of what opportunities exist for that individual as they transition. Let me give you an example. So I was 82nd Airborne. I was at a Fort Bragg, North Carolina. I transitioned. Now, I was given a lot of really great transition guidance, I think, probably. I don't really remember. I was a distracted transitioning soldier, fresh back from a couple deployments, had high school sweetheart waiting for me and all my buddies, and it was springtime, beautiful weather outside. I just wanted to be outside. I wanted to go anywhere else other than this classroom. So I don't have anything negative to say about my transition experience because I think I was given good stuff. I just didn't retain enough of it. But the example that I would use is if I were to go to that transition counselor or transition manager and say, hey, it's been an honor to serve, love the 82nd, love America. But I came, I saw, I conquered. I'm ready to go home. I'm going back to Cincinnati, Ohio. What do you have for me? And they would have looked at me like I was crazy. Like, man, we're in North Carolina. Why would I know what you have available for you in Cincinnati, Ohio? Pick up.
Here's how you write a resume.
When you get home. Yeah, and all still value. There's value, and you need to know how to write your resume. You need to know how to interview. You need to know how to conduct yourself. You need to know how to budget. If the military is, given you, housing subsidies, a chow hall, a lot of things have been taken care of for you. You don't have to think on your own as much when you transition. Heads up, you're on your own. So that's where that network comes in, or whatever valuable information that transition class can bestow upon you. But again, it was more on that local level. I'm going home. What are my options at home? And no transition manager can do that because how could they? You have men and women that are being dispersed to every corner of the globe in some cases, at least the country. They can't master each zip code and what opportunities exist. So that's where what I do now comes into play. Overseeing the DoD programs, we, for the first time this year, and it's, again, the timing is odd because COVID is odd, and COVID has created an odd world for us right now. But we were selected by the Army, by Human Resources Command out of Fort Knox, to be an employment service provider for all transitioning personnel for the Army in general, the Army community. That includes veterans, et cetera. It's really nothing new because we've been doing that for so long. We've been doing that since '98, but we created some unique experiences and content and collateral through our website to be able to more directly Steward Army soldiers as they transition. But basically, we can go to them and say, it doesn't matter where you're going. Drink in every bit of information that transition is giving to you. Drink it in, because you're going to need it. You're going to use it. But when it comes to going back home, you can start looking right now. You can plug in your zip code and find opportunities and start applying now. Start that conversation right now so that you can build up some of that social capital. You've got to connect with these recruiters on LinkedIn. You've got to identify a path. Figure out what you want to do. You may not know exactly what you want to do as a career, but figure out what a general category that you might be interested in, whether that's finance, human resources, engineering, whatever the case might be. Identify the path, start doing your homework, see if you need to, brush up on your skills, get a little bit of education or training under your belt, and start that process right now. I think one of the other big things that the military has done is incorporated what's called the Skill Bridge program. For those that aren't familiar with it, that are maybe active duty right now, you essentially have the opportunity to do an internship with an organization for up to 6 months prior to your ETS date. So you get paid by the military as that organization gives you real world civilian job experience. And the potential to be hired on the spot after that 6 months is incredibly valuable. Even if you don't get hired, after the 6 months, you still have a more substantial resume than most of your peers to your left or your right, because you've got civilian work experience already and you just hit your ETS date. And for those companies that might be listening, it's an opportunity to have an intern that's being paid for by the military. Their benefits are still being taken care of by the military. So there's some really unique programs that are out there right now that, the DoD is actively working hard to make sure that our men and women, America's military, are not transitioning and being thrown to the wolves. And I can attest to the fact that's not the case. They're being set up for success. It's a matter of us within our community taking advantage of these resources and really leveraging what we have at our fingertips to be successful.
We talked about SkillBridge a little bit last week, Tim, and talked about some of the different programs out there and different resources. And Chris, you bring up a great point that a lot of times we don't talk about in the community publicly, and that is putting the onus back on the veteran. And I was one of these people, as you just alluded to, you were as well. I went through the transition program in Camp Pendleton, California on the Marine base. And I was largely interested in getting out and going home. I didn't care what they were telling me. I didn't care how to open a savings account or write a resume. And that's all I really remember was, here's how you write a resume and open a savings account, get out. And they gave me like a bag, when you go to like Homerama or like one of those different events where they give you a plastic bag full of like different goodies.
Swag.
I felt like I had a swag bag and I walked out.
A couple notepads and pencils.
Right. Some pens, some pencils, right. Some sunglasses, right. So
your future's bright.
Right. I'm exaggerating a bit here, but that's what it was. It was I think back then there were a handful of resources that existed compared to today. But I was one of those guys that got out. I went and hung on my uniform, and I'm like, well, I'm going to go apply for jobs because anybody's going to want to hire a sergeant in the Marine Corps, right? No, man. My resume, and I've said this a million times, my resume was, I blow things up and I shoot guns. By the way, I can disassemble and reassemble a 50 caliber machine gun in under 2 minutes, right? Or under a minute and a half, whatever my time was. But nobody cares about that. And nobody cares about the ribbons that I wear on my chest. And nobody cares about the uniform I was wearing. For the most part, they don't care about that. Where they're hiring they're hiring the best person for the job. And so, I'm glad we're touching on that. And that is, when I talk to transitioning military, when we talk about the Skill Bridge programs, we talk about the different opportunities and resources that people have to lean into. The veteran, the transitioning service member, has to do their work. I would say that it's probably 80% of it. The other 20% is on the employers to say, hey, I recognize you, the machinist mate from the Navy, or you, the 11 Bravo from the Army. I recognize your value in my business, but that value can only be recognized to a certain point, that I understand a little bit about what you did in the military and what you're capable of, but you've got to put on a suit and shave your face, Tim, just kidding, and shave your face and come into my interview and put on the best show. So Again, we frequently don't talk about that, but it's a very viable thing. The transitioning service member has to carry 80% of that weight.
Yeah, absolutely. Matt, you brought it up.
Think about the context of the.
Go ahead.
Sorry, there's a lag there, Tim. Go ahead, man.
Yeah. Oh, I was just gonna reiterate what Matt was saying. It was a little different. A lot of these things weren't in place yet. The internet was still in its infancy, essentially, when Matt and I were getting out, especially that it was tough to at least find RecruitMilitary. You mentioned that it was born and started in 1998. 4 years later, I was getting out of the Marine Corps. So I had never even heard of anything like this at that time. So I'm going home. I'm grabbing a newspaper. I'm checking the classifieds. These veterans still have to do the work. But there's so many more resources nowadays. So don't be afraid to reach out to these resources like RecruitMilitary. If you're still in, do your research. See if you have the option to use those skill bridges. Find ways to start this process before you have to do it all on your own.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and ownership, and that is nothing new to our community. Extreme ownership. We talked about the thousands, the tens of thousands of military organizations that are out there right now, and it's good. It's a sea of noise, but I think it also carries over into the way that society embraces military men and women. We are looked at in so many cases as a charity case, and that's not the case. And I want to make sure that everybody listening to this right now knows that you're not a charity case. You are the best of the best, and hold yourself in that regard. Don't give in to thinking that you need to be coddled or you're damaged goods. You're not in any way, shape, or form. So some of the narratives that exist out there, while they have the best of intentions, the impact is actually negative, and it can create, somewhat of a sense of entitlement. And I'm not saying this is rampant across the entire military community, but I've encountered numerous instances where some of these guys and gals just think that they're owed, a job just because, by virtue of their service. You're owed the opportunity to apply, just like, in America, you're guaranteed, you have the right to pursue happiness. You don't have the right to happiness, but you have the right to pursue it. It's the same thing when we're talking about, socioeconomic status. You have the right to pursue whatever the heck you want, but you are still competing. Not just with your civilian counterparts, but your military buddy to your left and your right. If you're at a career fair and you're surrounded by military friendly companies, that's great. But just because you served doesn't mean that you're the perfect fit for Lockheed Martin. Do you have an aeronautical science background? Do you have a top secret security clearance? Do you have some of the prerequisites that these companies have? They're not giving out jobs because it's charity. They're bringing jobs to these environments because they deem the military community to be a cut above. But you have to prove that you're a cut above. So make sure your resume is squared away. Know how to put a 30-second elevator pitch together and really wow somebody with a first impression. Do best practices sort of stuff. Connect on LinkedIn. Understand how to follow through. Send thank yous for a recruiter's time, interviewing you or whatever the case might be. But you've got to stand out. And I just, I'd be remiss if we didn't remind ourselves of that every now and then. Yeah, we're veterans and we're awesome, and go America. That's all very well and true, but you've got to fill those shoes and fit that profile.
You mentioned something earlier, Chris, about the transition between these organizations that largely wanted to hire JMOs versus enlisted over the course of many years. And along the lines of what you're talking about now, you have more degrees, you have more high school diplomas, more degrees, more advanced degrees among the military population than you do the civilian population of the same age group per capita. And those, the bulk majority of those people are enlisted people. And the companies want to hire military, not because you put on a uniform and because you wear ribbons and medals on your chest. It's because these are people at the age of 19, 20 years old who have more technical experience on, let's just name a few: nuclear systems, aircraft maintenance. Like, you got a person that can't even drink legally taking apart billion-dollar aircraft in combat zones, and these are machines and equipment that have technology in them that we will not see in the civilian world for probably decades, if ever. That's I was a 20-year-old, 19-year-old, 20-year-old working on using GPS systems back before GPS systems were. I was carrying a GPS system before anybody out here had one. Learned how to fire the Javelin missile system, for example. I know that doesn't translate to anything out here, but the technology was so far advanced, I couldn't buy a beer legally. And so it does, just kind of reframing what you said. Companies want to hire these people because of the exceptional disciplines and attention to detail. And these people do this attention to detail in zero fail environments. You don't get the opportunity to mess up. When you're with the 82nd Airborne in a combat operation, messing up or a mistake means people get hurt or killed, or the mission fails. It's not just, oh, whoops, I wasted $25 of company money. Haha. It's now, this is a horrible screw up, and lives are changed. But to that point, not everybody that leaves the military is what we would call a rock star. Not everybody that leaves the military is prepared to join an organization as a rock star. And a lot of people sometimes they need a push in the right direction. Sometimes they obviously need mentorship, which is something else I talk about a lot, is reaching in and talking to people who have done it before. But the resources exist, and this is a common conversation in talent acquisition. Somebody knocks on the door and says, I applied for this job, didn't get it. That means you don't want to hire veterans. That's not it at all. We're hiring tons of veterans. It's just that you weren't the right fit for that job. Yeah, it wasn't you. It wasn't your background. You didn't have the right experience. So just wanted to add some flavor and color to that.
Yeah, not to beat a dead horse, but another great example that I've seen is, servicemen and women going for an occupation or a pay scale that they consider to be congruent with where they currently are. Meaning, you see this a lot from the senior level, on the senior officer side or the senior enlisted side. I'm not going to name anybody, or, let's just say for argument's sake, because I have seen this example, a sergeant major that wishes to go into an organization immediately into the C-suite. I'm a COO or I'm a CEO because I have that level of experience. I have managed this many people. I have managed billion-dollar budgets, this, that, and the other. And the quickest way to snuff that out is to say, oh, all right, Sergeant Major, let me make sure I understand this. You think that you make a lateral movement from Sergeant Major to COO. Does it work in reverse? Does the COO then get to just jump into your seat as Sergeant Major on day one? No, absolutely not, because they have no grasp of culture. They haven't earned rank. They haven't, it's, you gotta think in that regard. Just because you were something within the military doesn't mean you're that something outside of the military. And I don't mean to say like you're going to have to take a step backwards. That's not the case. That is not what I'm saying at all. But in some cases, depending on what you aspire to do, you may have to start at a slightly lower tier and fast track your way up there. You will fast track no matter what. If you've got military in your blood and your background, you're going to fast track, in whatever gig you jump into, whether you get an entry level job, which, by the way, everybody, you're more qualified than just an entry level job, but have some humility in some cases. And if the dream job is a couple steps beyond that entry level job, and that entry level job is the only thing that's available right now, get into that company. As long as it's not detrimental to your lifestyle, to your means or ability to support yourself or your family, you have to take that leap of faith in some cases and earn your stripes, to be cliche. You've got to earn your stripes within these organizations. But you will be given plenty of opportunity to perform and outperform your peers. It's a meritocracy. That's how most of corporate America works. It's not like the military where you've got time in service, time in rank, and you just make promotion or you make pay. It's different. So just keep that in mind. There's, I'm not saying that everybody has to take a BS job for the first gig, but be prepared to do that if the company is where you are really passionate about working, but the golden opportunity isn't available yet, throw your hat in the ring with another opportunity that might be close to it, or at least represent a path in that direction.
Right.
Yeah, and you're no longer in the military, so you don't have to get up at 5:30 in the morning and go on your forced run or do your PT that you don't want to do. You don't have to go climb the mountains. You don't have to put on your sack and go march for 10 miles with 80 pounds on your back, anything like that.
You don't?
Take those. You don't. Nobody's going to force you to do that anymore, Matt. You don't have to do
I'm
this.
going to stop. I'm going to stop then.
Yeah. You can put the pack down, buddy.
He does it for leisure.
But use that same hustle. I mean, that's what that is. That's hustle. Use that same hustle when you get to, we'll use the entry-level job. We'll take that entry-level job, if that's what's available, at that company you want to be with. That's 3-4 steps down the ladder from where you actually want to be, and take that hustle. You don't have to go run. You don't have to go march anymore. But I'm willing to bet that if you ask for more, if there's a training program available, if you volunteer for things, they'll see, hey, man, this guy's putting the work in. This individual wants this.
Right.
And then once that next step's available, bam, you're the shoe-in. You're going to be that guy. You jump into the next step and then just keep grinding, just keep hustling because you have it in you. You know you do. You spent those years in the military showing yourself and proving to yourself that you have that. So just keep that grind and keep that level of motivation and use what you learned and brought out of yourself in the military in the civilian sector. And Chris said, if you're a couple steps away, it won't take long as you keep using the tools you've gained in the military.
And have that conversation. Everybody thinks that it's just the company interviewing you. Interview the company too. It's an interesting market. COVID wreaked so much havoc on the employment landscape, but just prior to COVID, veteran unemployment had been the lowest it had ever been since the DOL started collecting that statistic. It was no longer a beggars can't be choosers sort of scenario. Now our community was able to be picky. We saw a lot of guys and gals at our career fairs and within our virtual ecosystem that already had a job. They were just seeing maybe there's something better out there. They were staying thirsty, professionally curious. And you can have that. You should have well-rounded questions prepared for your interviewer when you're going in for that interview. If you are taking the job that isn't the golden job, and again, I don't want to focus on like entry level because it's got so many negative connotations and it's not necessarily what anybody's destined for, but that's a scenario where you may have to consider it. But if that is the scenario, have that conversation with that recruiter and say, I aspire to be this, or this is, what kind of upward mobility do I have access to if I take this job? Is this job intended to keep me here, to be a worker bee forever, or whatever the case might be? Have those conversations, ask those questions. Why do other veterans love working here? You can ask those questions. There's nothing inappropriate about that, and there's all kinds of tips and best practices. Whether you poke your head in our door at RecruitMilitary, just go on Google and ask around and find some just low-hanging fruit interview questions that the interviewee should be asking. So I encourage everybody to do that so that you have your own expectations properly managed. You don't want to take a job and have it be a dead-end job and not even, acknowledge that it's a dead-end job, on the front end.
I'll say this. It blows me away how few questions get asked from the interviewee during interviews. When those questions are asked, it really leaves an impression on the interviewers. It lets them know that this person is showing that they also want to be invested as well. And then once that interview's over, you land that job, don't stop asking questions and don't be afraid to let them know exactly what you want. Say, hey, this is where I'm at now. This is where I want to go, and ask what would you say I need to do? What are you seeing? Is there some sort of training you would recommend? Is there a way I can maybe shadow this individual that's currently in this role and just start to pick things up? So don't be afraid to ask for what you want, because if you don't ask, they can't read your mind. They're never going to know. But if you ask that question, they're at least going to say, hey, Matt, Chris, I have these guys that are very interested in these roles, let's start to work with these guys and get them the training they need, because at some point we do believe that we can put them in those roles and they're going to be successful. So let's start that process now.
And it's like test driving a car or anything else. You're going to spend, for a full-time job, you're going to spend probably more of your time, more of your daytime time in the office in the job than you're going to spend at home doing extracurriculars. And thusly, you want to make sure that you're making the best of it. It's time that you don't get back. It's the one commodity you never get more of. So make the best of it. It takes us a while. You got to learn industries. You got to learn jobs. It takes us a while to get to that understanding. And it took me a number of years out of my military service to understand that time is valuable. It's exceptionally valuable. And I could be using that time to get up that ladder, so to speak. But don't waste it by sitting around going, well, I hate this job, or I hate what I'm doing and it's not getting me anywhere. Go look for the next thing. Go look for some opportunity that can help you grow.
So that's just about going to wrap us up. Chris, I wanted to give you one last opportunity to kind of talk about where you're at currently, the things you do. And you mentioned the elevator pitch earlier, so we'll give you a little bit longer than that 30-second elevator pitch, but just Recruit Military. You guys are an awesome organization, and thank you for everything you do. And the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you so much. So yeah, anybody that's listening, Recruit Military, we're here to help you get connected. We're that conduit between you and corporate America. We work with thousands upon thousands of organizations, many from Fortune 500, Fortune 200, everybody in between. So anything you might be interested in, there's likely some level of representation there as far as opportunities go. You want to be a government contractor, we work with, the Northrop Grummons, Lockheed Martin, Vanilla Arabia. There's a lot to cherry pick from, and it's not a one size fits all sort of model. But it's a live ecosystem, 24/7. Check out our events, check out our job board. We've got about 250,000 open active opportunities that are there specifically for you. So just take advantage of them. We're an arrow in your quiver. If you've got leads with another party or your own network, run with it. But we're here as a contingency plan at the very least. And as Matt and Tim had said, asking good questions, being prepared, understanding what your path forward looks like, knowing that you're competing, just understand that you're being put in an environment with preferential consideration. While your military service isn't your guaranteed gig, it's not a guaranteed job. It weighs in your favor considerably. You are preferred above most other demographics. So be proud, be confident, and learn some of those nuances and the intangibles, and the rest comes easy. It's a really good environment right now as far as corporate America being genuinely military friendly. It's not about flag waving. We've had about a decade or so's worth of time to get data behind this push, so that these companies understand that it's not just about altruism or patriotism. It's good business sense. They know that we make better employees and add better value to the bottom line. So be confident. Lots of opportunities out there. Matt and Tim, I really appreciate you guys having me on today.
Thank you very much. And once again, just kind of reiterate this: over 100 job fairs in 60 plus markets. It doesn't matter where you're located at in this country. There's more than likely a job fair in your area. And with the COVID and the social distancing, the virtual job fairs are a great way to still get those same opportunities with maintaining safety standards and practices. So absolutely awesome stuff there. With that being said, my daughter's got a 20-pound pug that I'm going to go put some goggles on and try to figure some stuff out.
They're doggles.
Doggles. We're going to try to figure this out. So until next week, we are Veterans Beyond the Wire podcast. Thank you for listening. We'll see you then.